The air in the reclaimed substation hums with the low thrum of the war surplus transmitter, a faint ozone tang mixing with the ghost of cold coffee. Dust motes dance in the single neon tube, casting a wound-red glow across hand-labeled vinyl sleeves. The console, patched with kente tape and salvaged brass, pulses with a life that refuses to be forgotten.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Oranienzicht checks in at 52 degrees and clear. Wind check, southeast at 10 miles an hour.
That worth isn't just personal. It's about the blueprints we choose for our communities, the systems we build and inhabit.
Exactly. This structural self-worth is tested daily. Consider the latest escalating conflicts and systemic fragilities.
Building from the ground up. I like that.
Tonight, the air crackles with a dangerous echo. Tehran launches more strikes as Israel warns it is ready to strike Iran again with even greater force.
The immediate consequence is a further erosion of civilian security across the region. Millions in both Iran and Israel face direct threat, escalating humanitarian crises, and disrupting global oil prices, impacting economies from Mumbai to Minneapolis.
This isn't just about missile trajectories. It's about breaking generational cycles of retaliation. We see children growing up under sirens, inheriting a legacy of fear. The choice isn't just war or peace, but how we rebuild trust from fractured ground, honoring the dignity of every life.
Patching in a caller, the pattern auditor. You're on the signal.
This is the pattern auditor. You talk about fractured ground. What are the specific alternative paths to de-escalation that aren't being pursued? And who actually pays the cost of inaction on those paths beyond the obvious human toll?
Coffee's cold. Doesn't matter. The signal is warm, and the board is reading clean. Copy that. Bringing it back to the main thread.
One clear alternative is direct, multilateral diplomatic engagement, perhaps through UN-backed channels, pushing for a verifiable ceasefire. Another path involves leveraging economic incentives from global powers to halt aggression. The cost of not pursuing these falls heavily on regional economies, displacing thousands more and fueling black markets beyond the unspeakable human cost of lost lives.
Our chosen next move from a sovereign architect's view, it's about building an architecture of accountability. Initiate independent investigations into all strikes, establishing clear lines of provenance for civilian harm. This isn't about picking sides. It's about asserting the fundamental dignity of every life, demanding consent for their future security, not just reacting to triggers.
Accountability and dignity, those are core structural elements. From the escalating tensions in the Middle East, we turn our gaze to Africa, where calls for accountability are also reaching a fever pitch. Togee, over to the European Parliament's stance on Sudan. The European Parliament calls for terrorist listing of rapid support forces in Sudan, a move signaling severe international pressure.
This listing aims to isolate the RSF, but it risks complicating already dire humanitarian aid efforts for over 25 million Sudanese civilians in need. It also exposes the EU to accusations of overreach if not carefully implemented, potentially undermining future diplomatic efforts in the Horn of Africa.
Listing the RSF is like trying to label a Hydra head after it's already burned down the village. The core issue is the systemic violence that has displaced millions, turning ancient markets into battlegrounds and eroding the very fabric of Sudanese identity and community trust.
Lines open. Patching in a caller. Go ahead.
This is the pattern auditor again. If a terrorist listing complicates humanitarian aid, what is a genuine alternative to hold the RSF accountable without further punishing the Sudanese people? And what are the long-term diplomatic costs for the EU if this listing backfires?
A viable alternative involves targeted sanctions against individual RSF leaders and their financial facilitators, preventing their access to international markets, without broader implications for aid organizations. Another path is robust support for the African Union's mediation efforts, empowering regional solutions. The EU's diplomatic cost could be a perceived imposition of external solutions, alienating local stakeholders and prolonging the conflict.
Our sovereign next move is to build a system of provenance of harm. Instead of just labeling, we demand transparent tracking of financial flows that enable atrocities and direct resources to local peace-building initiatives led by Sudanese civil society groups. That's how you truly restore dignity and consent for self-determination, not just with a punitive label.
We have already run that tape. Here is the close-loop takeaway. A software glitch blamed for mass outage. A stark reminder of our brittle digital infrastructure.
This outage, impacting critical banking services and public transport networks across 3 major cities, London, Tokyo, and New York, exposed millions to immediate disruption, costing businesses an estimated $50 million in lost transactions and productivity in a single day.
It's not just a glitch, it's a digital blackout, leaving us in the dark. Our lives are woven into these invisible threads, from paying for groceries to emergency calls. When the thread snaps, our collective autonomy falters, reducing us to analog helplessness and exposing our over-reliance on centralized systems.
Signal coming in.
The pattern auditor. A glitch sounds like an excuse. What are the specific systemic vulnerabilities that lead to such widespread outages, and what genuine alternatives exist to prevent future digital collapses? Who ultimately bears the burden when these glitches become commonplace?
The systemic vulnerability often lies in monoculture software reliance and centralized infrastructure, where a single point of failure can cascade globally. A strong alternative is decentralizing critical services onto diverse network architectures or mandating open-source audits for all public-facing systems. The burden disproportionately falls on small businesses unable to absorb losses and marginalized communities who rely on accessible digital services for essential needs.
From a sovereign architect perspective, our next move is to gamify digital resilience. We could develop public tools for network mapping, allowing communities to identify single points of failure, turning passive users into active guardians of their digital commons. This fosters true consent and shared ownership of our informational architecture, building robust inner and civic systems.
Gamifying resilience, a brilliant way to turn confusion into actionable vectors. Ownership of self, ownership of signal. These are the stakes. Thank you for tuning in, for building with us. Black Star Pirate Radio will keep the airwaves open.
Rules bent wisely.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in, Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.